We're going to be working on this page, and this is a page that you're already familiar with because we used it in our last week's nesting exercises. I'm going to be modifying the SASS that we already have created for this page and make it more efficient by incorporating variables. The HTML to my page is linking out to some Google fonts. I'm linking out also to Font Awesome. I have a link to my variable.css file, which is the CSS file that's being generated from my SASS file. And I'm using a div with an ID of container. It wraps around everything on my page. I have a header tag that contains my search element. And then I have two article tags that contain some various HTML. The SASS file is exactly identical to where we left off after last week's exercise. As you can see, I have quite a few rules that I've specified, and I'm taking advantage of using nesting so that I can write more specific selectors and make my SASS easier to read. Before we get started with variables, I did want to point out in SASS that there's two ways that you can create comments. One of the ways in which you'll create comments is the general CSS-based comment. So if I go ahead and write, this is a comment, when we actually save and the code gets compiled, if we open up our CSS file, and let me just open that up for you real quickly, you'll see that here's the comment that I just wrote. It is possible in SASS to make comments that will not get compiled with your code. And to do that, you're going to use // So I'll write a message here. And if we save and we check our CSS file, you can see that that comment does not get rendered. This is really helpful because as you go ahead and make your SASS files, you may want to incorporate some comments that will remind you of something or leave a note for someone else, but you won't want those things to be compiled in the ending CSS. So that can be achieved by using the // as opposed to the standard CSS-based comments. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can streamline this page by incorporating some variables. I like to start off my variables right at the beginning of the page. So I'm going to make a note up here that just says variables. And then I'm going to start by defining my variables. The first variable name is going to be called headlines. So I start the variable name with a $. I write the value for that name. I'll put a colon, and then I'll go ahead and put whatever the value is for that particular variable. So in this case, all my headlines are going to be Barlow, and they're going to be using a sans serif font. I'm also going to make another variable called body text. And this one is going to use my Lato font and resolve to a sans serif. So now I've declared my two variables. Doing this does nothing to your code. If we save our code and we go look at our page in the browser, nothing has changed. If we check the CSS file, again, nothing has changed. And it is worth noting that the variable values do not get rendered out within the CSS file. They are something that only exist inside of our SASS file. Now that I have these variables defined, though, I want to take advantage and start using them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace anywhere that I'm calling the Barlow font with my headline variable. Now in the last exercise, we did use the Barlow font throughout our exercise. I no longer want to use the Barlow font, but I want to take advantage of my Lato font. So instead of typing out Lato and specifying sans serif, all I have to do now is write the name of my variable. And whenever you specify the name of the variable, it will always start with the $. So I'm going to have my container default to my Lato or my body text variable. If I save my page and we go check it out in the browser, you can now see that the page styling has changed slightly. It is now displaying this Lato font. Let's go ahead and make some more changes in regards to fonts. I'm going to come down to the rule that we already have established for our H1, and I'm going to add a declaration for font family. And we're going to have this display our headlines variable. So now the H1s will display with our headlines variable. If we look at our paragraph tag, you can see that our paragraph tag is using the font shorthand declaration. So we're specifying the font size in M's and the line height, and then we have the font name. I'm going to replace my Georgia, and I'm going to have this display with our body text font. So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and specify body text. Now this actually probably isn't necessary in this example since we've already specified that our container uses the body text. So this would trump. But because I'm using shorthand here, I have to include a font family. And I did want to just show you how you would incorporate a variable in a shorthand notation. So we'll just leave this as body here. When we save our page and we look at it in the browser and refresh, you can see that the page styling has been updated. As you can see, it's easy to incorporate variables. For font families and font stacks, they can be excellent because you don't have to continually write all of the text within the font stack. All you have to do is specify a variable name, and it can be as long or short as you want. I recommend using a short descriptive name, and then you can specify where you want that to be in your file whenever you need to call it. In this example, I'm setting my variable to a string. As you can see, some of my string values are encapsulated inside of quotes and some are not. Either way, it'll work fine when you're generating your variables. If we look at our CSS file, you can see that CSS has no reference to the variables other than the declarations where we've made the variables are displaying as we would normally expect them to be. I could use these as necessary throughout my file, and at any time if I decide I want to change the font, all I have to do is change this one line. I no longer have to hunt through my file and try to find out all of the places that I may have declared a specific font family. This is really handy and can really streamline your workflow.